How could I have known that moment would change everything? It was just an ordinary afternoon, the kind of quiet day where nothing ever seems out of place. Michael was at work. The house carried that silence it always did when it was just me and Ethan. I was folding laundry, moving from room to room without much thought, when something broke through the silence. At first, I thought it was music, a faint sound, maybe a video playing somewhere upstairs. But then, as I climbed the staircase with the basket in my arms, I realized it wasn't music at all. It was something else. Something that made me stop mid-step, my hand tightening around the wooden banister. The hallway stretched ahead of me, dimly lit by the afternoon light pressing through the blinds. Ethan's bedroom door wasn't fully closed. It sat slightly ajar, like an invitation or a warning. I don't know why, but instead of turning back, I stepped closer. My breath caught in my chest as I approached, the sound growing clearer, more distinct. I told myself I was being ridiculous. He was 24 now, an adult with his own life and privacy. Maybe he was on a call, watching a movie, doing something completely harmless. But something inside me, maybe curiosity, desire, I don't even know what to call it, pushed me closer. I leaned forward just enough to see, and that's when everything froze. Ethan was sitting on the edge of his bed, his laptop open, the glow of the screen painting his face in stark colors. His hands moved quickly, nervously, and in that instant there was no mistaking what he was doing. The realization struck me like a cold wave, pulling the air straight from my lungs. I should have turned away immediately. I should have closed my eyes and walked back down the stairs. But I didn't. For a single unbearable moment, I just stood there, paralyzed, watching a version of reality I had never imagined I would stumble into. A part of me was excited to see it, but the other was horrified. My stomach tightened, my mind raced. 1,000 thoughts collided inside me. Disbelief, shame, desire, envy. None of them strong enough to make sense of what I was seeing. Ethan shifted suddenly, as if he sensed my presence. His eyes came toward the door, and then, in a single heartbeat, our eyes met. The blood drained from my face. His expression collapsed into horror, the color rising to his cheeks instantly. He struggled to slam the laptop shut, his hands trembling so violently it almost fell from his lap. "Clara," he said, his voice cracking, "I thought the door was closed." I couldn't speak. My throat was dry, my heart pounding so violently I thought it might give me away. "I'm sorry," he muttered, his voice small, breaking apart under the weight of the silence that swallowed the room. I finally stepped back, my heel catching the floorboard as I steadied myself. The words slipped out, barely audible, not even making sense to me. I shouldn't have... But I didn't finish. I turned, my hands trembling against the wood of the banister, and walked down the stairs. My pulse roared in my ears. Every step felt heavier than the last. By the time I reached the bottom, I pressed the laundry basket against the counter and buried my face in my hands. My breath came uneven, shallow. What had I just walked into? And why did it feel like nothing in this house would ever be the same again? I tried to carry on as if nothing had happened. I wiped down the counters, put the folded laundry in neat piles, busied myself with chores that suddenly felt meaningless. My hands moved, but my mind was stuck upstairs, replaying those seconds again and again, like a loop I couldn't escape. Maybe deep down I didn't want to escape it. The air in the house was heavier now, almost electric. Every sound felt amplified. The creak of the stairs, the hum of the fridge, even the distant bark of a dog outside. When Ethan finally appeared at the top of the stairs, I froze. He hesitated, one hand gripping the banister, his eyes fixed on the floor. He didn't look like the young man who usually carried himself with a mix of confidence and quiet reserve. He looked small, weighed down by something neither of us could ignore. "Clara," he said softly, almost too soft to hear. I forced myself to look up, though my chest was still tight. "Ethan," I managed, my voice low, unsteady. He shifted his weight nervously, then took a few slow steps down. His collar was crooked, his hair mussed like he'd run his hands through it 100 times in the last few minutes. By the time he reached the bottom, he still wouldn't meet my eyes. "I'm sorry," he blurted out suddenly. "I didn't mean for you to see that. I thought the door was closed. I wasn't thinking." I pressed my lips together, searching for words. Nothing prepared me for this moment. "You don't have to explain," I said finally, cutting through the silence. My tone was firmer than I expected. "You're an adult, Ethan. I shouldn't have walked in without knocking." His eyes looked up at me then, wide with something between relief and shame. "But it was wrong," he whispered, shaking his head. "It felt like I crossed a line with you, and I didn't mean—" "You didn't," I interrupted quickly, sharper this time. I didn't know what to say. There was so much happening in my mind. Silence pressed in again, thicker than before. I could feel his eyes lingering on me, but I refused to meet them. My gaze stayed fixed on the countertop, on the folded laundry that suddenly felt like a lifeline. "I'll give you space," he said quietly, his voice breaking. "I don't want to make this worse." Without waiting for me to respond, he turned and walked back upstairs. I watched him go. His eyes on me had felt so full of desire, like he was trying to undress me with them. I leaned against the counter, my legs trembling beneath me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the adult in control of the household. I felt like someone standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at the drop, unsure if the ground beneath me would hold. That night, we didn't speak again. We moved through the house like strangers, shadows passing in the same space. At dinner, we sat across from each other in silence, the scrape of utensils on plates louder than any words we might have said. The tension was too much to ignore. There was a certain buzz in the air. Every time we passed a bowl or shared a glance, I felt something inside me shift. A part of me that was screaming to be let out. And deep down, I knew this wasn't over. The quiet pressed on me until I felt like I couldn't breathe. Every time I looked at him, all I could see was what I'd walked in on earlier, his flushed face, what his hand was holding, and everything that was going on. I told myself over and over to forget it, to pretend it never happened, but the image wouldn't leave me. When I finally carried my plate to the sink, my hands trembled. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in the living room, staring at the TV without really watching it. When Ethan excused himself and disappeared down the hall, I thought that would be the end of it. But after 10 minutes, maybe 15, I found myself standing. My feet moved before my head caught up. I walked down the hall, stopping outside his room. A strip of light glowed beneath the door. I raised my hand, hesitated, and asked myself what in the world I thought I was doing. I should have gone back to the couch. I should have turned away. Instead, my knuckles tapped the wood. "Ethan?" I whispered. There was a pause, then his voice, low and guarded. "Yeah?" I pushed the door open just enough to peek inside. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, a blanket bunched across his lap like it had become his shield. When he looked up at me, his eyes were wide, cautious. But there was something else there, too. Something I didn't want to admit. I noticed. I stepped inside, closing the door softly behind me. "We need to talk." I wanted my voice to sound firm, but it came out fragile. I meant to tell him clearly that what I'd seen earlier wasn't acceptable, but a small part of me wasn't sure if it was from anger or something else. "I didn't mean for you to see," he blurted out. His hands twisted the blanket. "I didn't plan it. It just happened." I swallowed hard. "I know, but Ethan, you can't—" I stopped. The rest of the sentence caught in my throat. "You can't do this. You can't look at me like that. You can't make me feel like this." He lifted his eyes then, and I swear it felt like he could see straight through me. "It's not just that," he said carefully. "It's not just messing around. I've thought about you. More than I should." My chest tightened. The words hit me harder than I expected, sharper, heavier. For a split second, I felt myself weaken. A part of me wanted to close the distance. I shook my head, though my voice cracked when I spoke. "You don't mean that." "I do," he said, steady this time. And when I turned to leave, his words followed me low, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. "I don't care if it's wrong. I just want you to know how I feel." Every part of me screamed that I had to be stronger than this, that I had to set the boundary and never let it slip. But why did it feel so much like I already had? I walked out, but I couldn't sleep at all. I kept tossing and turning for hours until my feet were taking me to his room. That's when I knew turning back from this was going to be impossible. The next couple of days were torturous. I realized how much I had missed being desired. All I wanted was to cross every boundary. I needed him in a way that I could no longer explain.